Welcome back to the Access Vikings podcast. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleague, Ben Goessling. We are here at Lumen Field in Seattle, where the Vikings were just shut out 26-0 by the Seahawks, by their former quarterback, Sam Darnold. And now they're 4-8. The season feels like it has slipped away, or is at least starting to really slip away from them.
I think it's just about completely slipped away.
Yes, yeah, they're out of contention in the NFC North at this point, and it's just kind of getting through this season now. Like, I think that's officially coming out of this game. It's, okay, let's just get through the rest of this. Like, there's not too much more, I feel like, that they can aspire to besides seeing progress from J.J. McCarthy, who they, I think, hope to return next week, and maybe just kind of patching some of these holes that have sprung up.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of them today. Obviously, Max Brosmer starts for the first time in the NFL, throws 4 interceptions in the game, 19 of 30, I believe. Some similar themes from what we've seen from J.J. McCarthy at times, where he's probably working a little too quickly. And we've seen McCarthy kind of go both ways on this. But Brosmer, I think, a lot of times was probably working a little too quick. And he's praised for reading things quickly, but sometimes probably too fast on the concepts and not letting things develop to the degree that he could. Obviously, the turnovers were the story of this game, including one very pivotal moment in the second quarter, the pick six that we're going to get into here in a little bit. But they weren't able to do much of anything offensively. I mean, they had at one point 10 carries for 10 yards. That went into the thinking on said pick six, which we'll talk about. But this was the fewest yards defensively that they've allowed in a loss since the last game of the 2011 season, which essentially meant nothing between them and the Bears. So it's been a lot. 219 yards is all they allowed today. They got a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold. They forced 2 turnovers. They pick him off once, and then they force a fumble on the Dallas Turner strip sack, which was the play that would have set them up to possibly take the lead in the second quarter. So they did a lot of good things against Darnold. Obviously, held Jackson Smith and Jigba pretty much out of the game. Neither he nor Justin Jefferson had a catch until middle of the second half. But when you turn the ball over like that, it's just, you can't win. It's 5 turnovers, you're not going to win in the NFL. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, Jackson Smith and Jigba and Justin Jefferson is what I ended up leading the notebook with today, because 2 of the biggest wide receiver stars in the NFL right now, Jackson Smith and Jigba, is leading the league in receptions and receiving yards. And both of them were pretty much completely shut down. I think combined they had 4 catches on 10 targets. And like you said, those catches didn't come until the second half. And Justin Jefferson, we've been talking about his frustration and how he's been graceful in handling that the past few weeks. It started to bubble over today. And we saw him on the sideline go over, sit by himself, or maybe just with one teammate next to him, have his towel over his head, and then he decided to not speak with reporters in the locker room post-game, which is certainly the first time that's happened since I've been here, and I was in the locker room all post-game today for the duration of it. And I believe you said that's the first time that you can recall.
Yeah, I mean, I've covered every game of his career, and I can't remember that ever happening. He's typically win, lose, or draw. Well, they probably haven't had a draw in his time. They've had draws, but not in his time, I suppose. But win or lose, he usually speaks to the reporters after every game. And we've mentioned this on social media, and everybody says, well, what is there for him to say? I understand the point, but it is noteworthy given how front and center he has been, and I think his voice as a leader of he talks a lot about being the leader of this team, being the captain of this team. It's not to say that everybody has to speak all of the time. I think the point is it's telling when he doesn't, because he typically is the guy that goes out and does that just about every time he's asked to do it, and certainly is front and center after every game. So the fact that he did not do that, I think, is somewhat indicative of how he's feeling. And, it doesn't mean that this is a step away from him asking for a trade. I mean, I've seen that talk as well. It's like, that's not going to happen. For many reasons, the salary cap ramifications high on the list, that's not going to happen. But it is, I think, it's a window into how he's feeling right now. And it's worth paying attention to that, just because this is getting to be uncharted territory for him in terms of the production and the level of uncertainty there seems to be for him with a quarterback. He's been through it a lot since Kirk Cousins left in terms of the changes at the position, but I don't know that we've seen him quite this outwardly frustrated before. Certainly saying I'm not talking after the game, I'm not sharing any of my thoughts on how this went, is just, that's unusual for him. I can't, like I say, I can't think of a single time in 6 years of covering him that we've seen that happen. So worth keeping that in mind just as we're trying to process this one and what the Vikings do coming out of it.
Yeah, well, and I think, like you said, it's not necessarily about, like, does he have the answers for what's going wrong here?
Yeah, obviously not.
He's a guy that you want to and you kind of need to gauge the temperature on a team like this where he is a leader. And you do that with a lot of guys in the locker room, and that's really the main thing you're looking for in a locker room post-game, because often they do say, well, I need to look at the film on this thing or whatever. They don't always have some of the really spelled out answers that we'll get later in the week of this is what happened. But yeah, that was definitely something that was intriguing exiting the locker room. I think too, just observationally, it was interesting to me in the locker room, the way the Seahawks locker room is set up. It was kind of the visiting locker room, that is. It was kind of offensive players on one side, defensive on the other. And the defensive side was definitely a little more chatty. I mean, there was no music playing. It wasn't rambunctious in there. But you could just tell, tenor-wise, there was a little bit different quality, I felt like, to the two sides of the locker room. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, the offense, this is the first time the Vikings have been shut out in a game since 2007. It was November of 2007. They lost 34-0 at Lambeau Field, and this is the first time that's happened since then. They almost got shut out here in 2018. They scored a late touchdown to avoid a shutout, and after that game, they fired John DeFilippo, their first-year offensive coordinator. He and Mike Zimmer had been kind of going back and forth all season about Zimmer wanting him to run the ball more often, and a lot of that season was about, well, I'm not going to run it because I don't trust the offensive line to be able to make it sustainable to do it. And that's where a lot of the play calling went ultimately. After the game here, John DeFilippo lost his job. This is a different situation, certainly. Kevin O'Connell calling plays. I don't think Kevin O'Connell is going to hand that over at any point anytime soon, and he's typically been pretty good at it. But he is running into a little bit of the same thing, and I asked him about it after the game. He said, we've run the ball in third and fourth and short situations a fair amount, and we've been successful with it. They have. When they have done it, I think they've done it 14 times this year. They've converted on 10 of those. But he felt today, missing 2 offensive linemen at that point in the game, it ended up being 3 later on, but he decides not to run it on a 4th and 1, and the result of it, as he put it, was catastrophic.
Right. The play you're mentioning came late in the second quarter. The Vikings had just gotten the ball in the red zone after Dallas Turner strip sacked Sam Darnold. Jalen Redmond recovered. And I thought it was interesting hearing Max Brosmer talk through the play a little bit. You kind of led that line of questioning there. But, yeah, obviously becomes the 85-yard, I think is what it officially went down as, pick 6 by Ernest Jones IV.
Yes, yeah. So basically that play, Max Brosmer said it was basically PA power. So you're faking a power run. C.J. Ham, I think, had a short handoff, kind of a play fake there. And then Brosmer boots out to the right. He said it was a slide, and then you could cut the end. Obviously, nobody cut DeMarcus Lawrence coming through. Josh Oliver maybe would have had a shot at him. He puts a swim move on Josh Oliver, and then Aaron Jones is the only other guy that could do it. But both of those guys are part of the pass concept. There's a high cross, kind of the back of the end zone. There's a flat route, and then kind of a medium cross. You kind of, typical bootleg where it's a 3-level concept that you're trying to hit, and nobody picks up DeMarcus Lawrence. He has his hand on Brosmer's left arm. Brosmer's trying to get away from him, and then basically kind of throws almost a submarine, Chad Bradford style, if anybody remembers him from either watching the Oakland A's or seeing Moneyball. He is a fairly prominent character in that movie, but kind of that submarine style throw obviously doesn't go anywhere successfully, and if he takes a sack there, yes, they turn the ball over, but the Seahawks are backed up. Instead, Ernest Jones picks it off and goes 85 yards for the touchdown that effectively changed this entire game. The Vikings had a chance to either, if they kick the field goal, they tie the game there, or have a chance to take the lead back with that fumble recovery that they got off the strip sack, and then instead it's 10-0, and basically they weren't able to do much else after that. So, yeah, in the end, that play kind of became the pivotal moment in the game, and obviously one that Max Brosmer wanted back. Kevin O'Connell said, I needed to make a different play call there. Just a lot of things about that a lot of people will regret looking at the film tomorrow, and then probably for a little while beyond that.
Yeah, Ernest Jones had another pick later in the game, and then Reek Woolen had one on Brosmer as well. You mentioned that the Vikings were missing a few of their offensive linemen. Christian Darrisaw was ruled out entering today, or I guess when we got here today.
Yes.
Donovan Jackson had already been ruled out Friday. Sounded like with Darrisaw, it was a combination of both the injury he suffered against the Packers and him still working through his knee.
Yeah, the foot injury against the Packers, and then O'Connell said it's always that question of him kind of coming through that knee injury, and that's been an ongoing thing. We've talked about it throughout the year. I think we're going to continue to talk about it the rest of this year because it is a week-to-week discussion, I think, with him and with the training staff and with the coaches of, is he feeling good enough to go? Is he feeling confident in that knee? And can they trust him to play the full game? Because that's the other piece of it, is you could have him be active like he was against the Chargers after that pregame workout, and then he comes out after 8 snaps in that game. So you can't have that happen where you're counting on a guy, you use a roster spot on a guy, one of the active spots that they get, because those come down to a choice here and there, and they want everybody that they have up on a game day to be somebody they can use. So I think a lot of that discussion does become, are you ready to play a full game or not? And if not, then maybe you don't go with it. But obviously, Justin School at left tackle was a lot of what we've seen this year, and it just doesn't work terribly well. And then they lose Ryan Kelly to a hip injury in the middle of the game, which is going to be something we have to keep an eye on this week as well.
Yeah, Ryan Kelly, and then Aaron Jones exited as well in the second half, and I talked to him post-game in the locker room. He said he was feeling all right, and he referenced the AC joint sprain that he suffered against the Lions a few weeks ago, so we'll see how he manages that throughout the week, but at least coming out of the game, it didn't seem like they thought it was something new with him. It was just a re-aggravation, maybe.
Yeah, it seems like that is the case there, and then it's a hip flexor for Ryan Kelly, so Kevin O'Connell said both Jones and Kelly will be evaluated further this week as they try to get ready for the Commanders game. But yeah, I mean, they were going to be in a tough spot, I thought, against that front. That's a good defensive front. They throw a lot of different things at you, and they have a lot of players that can just win one-on-one matchups, whether it's DeMarcus Lawrence, whether it's the tackles in the middle of that line, Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. So they are a tough front, and we thought that coming into this game. But when you're playing down that many linemen, it's a tough ask for a quarterback making his first start, especially in this building where Sam Darnold's win here notwithstanding, the Vikings have not had a lot of success in the last couple of decades.
Yeah, let's flip over to the Vikings defense, and then obviously by nature, Sam Darnold's performance as well. Jonathan Grenard was back in the mix today after missing 2 games, and it seemed like maybe he was on a pitch count. I don't know if Kevin O'Connell was asked about that, but just by nature of when he was coming in, it felt very situational. But
a lot of passing situations.
He was successful. I mean, he flushed Sam Darnold out of the pocket pretty early, led to that Eric Wilson sack, and all around, they did exactly what Brian Flores said earlier this week, right? They blitzed Sam Darnold, and they really tried to bring him down. I think it was 4 sacks in the end. Most of those came in the first half. Yeah,
Brian Flores was indeed a man of his word on them coming after Sam Darnold. I think at one point I was thinking, because I think they had 3 sacks in the first quarter, so I was like, they may be on pace to match what happened in the Rams game at the end of last season. It seemed like Jonathan Grenard must have had clued into what their snap count was going to be, whether watching Sam Darnold or watching their center, because there were a couple of times where he got about as good of a jump on the snap as you're ever going to see. That was the pressure, I think, on the Eric Wilson sack, that he got a great jump, and then he got called for an offsides unabated to the quarterback later in the game, but that was probably, again, because he was so keyed in on it that he knew where to go. So he made an impression. Dallas Turner comes up with 2 strip sacks. I thought the second one where he gets the strip sack and forces the fumble that the Vikings recovered, he comes through relatively unblocked. I think there was a chip from their backup tight end, but you saw a little more from him today. Andrew Van Ginkel got one, beating, I think, a chipper, a tight end, and a running back with a spin move to get home, too. So they did have their moments against that offense, and Sam Darnold really did not do a lot to have a major impact on this game. It did not become Sam Darnold continuing the performance he's had this season. It was about that turnover that kind of changed the game, and then a couple of times where the Seahawks have advantageous field position because of turnovers. I mean, that has been a big theme this season, and certainly was again today. Yeah, I asked Dallas Turner about the cadence thing and if they were clued in on something special there, and he didn't seem, from what I took from it, he didn't seem to say there was something special. It was just that that's something they drill in on every week and have a good kind of coaching staff way of prepping them on that. But I am curious. I wanted to ask Jonathan Grenard too, and he slipped out of the locker room as well after this one. But quarterback they've practiced against a lot. There may be cues that they're pretty keyed into just from all of the reps they've had against him. Could have been some of that stuff. But, yeah, they got a lot of pressure. However they did it, they got a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold.
Ben, seeing Sam Darnold here in person again, what stood out to you about his game and maybe where it's changed or hasn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we saw was similar. I think he looked a little bit at the end of the first quarter. He seemed like he had taken a hit and he was struggling a little bit, kind of limping to the sideline, just a little gimpy as he was walking over. And, probably somewhat similar to what happened here last year when he got hurt and stayed in the game, extends that play and hits Justin Jefferson for the touchdown that kind of put the game away. But, yeah, a lot of, I think, the things that the Vikings saw and liked about him last year, you saw on display, and also some of the things that he has struggled with. The pressure in his face is something that he doesn't handle very well. I think you saw some of that happen again today, and that line had a lot of trouble keeping him out of duress, and that's going to be something they have to deal with as they go forward, because that's going to be a team that has a chance to make a run in the NFC, but protecting him is going to be a lot of the key to making that happen. I think overall it's just interesting to see him in this setting. We got a chance to say hello to him a little bit after the game. Yeah. He walked over to talk to a number of Vikings players, did so before the game, but was kind of hanging around waiting to say hello to some guys, and a number of us that covered him talked with him for a little bit afterwards, and he seems like he's become pretty comfortable here. He seems like he's appreciated the fan base, appreciated the team for the faith they've shown in him. He's the last guy out of the tunnel before the game starts today, and they're gonna go as far as he can take them, and they're gonna have a chance to make a run. It's gonna be a very crowded NFC West, so we'll see if they win that division, but they, I believe now, are tied for the lead, combined with the fact that the Rams lost to the Panthers today.
Yeah, and they still have to face the Rams another time this season. I think it's December 18th that they'll see them again, and that obviously is the key there, because that's been a little bit of kryptonite for Sam Darnold through
Must be a
these
Thursday
past 2
night
years.
game.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, that sounds right. So, yeah, they'll square off then. Any other thoughts from this one? We didn't really see anything crazy on special teams. Will Riker doesn't even make an appearance today, obviously, with the goose egg. I thought Ryan Wright started out good and then maybe had some rough patches in the middle, but nothing else really to write home about.
Penalties again. I mean, a couple of holding calls, which has become a recurring theme. I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of problems that continue to pop up with this team over and over and over. And good teams typically find ways to eliminate some of those repeating problems. And we have, I think, throughout the season, there have been a lot of familiar theme type stuff, whether it's what I'm writing or what we're talking about. I feel like we come back to that a lot. The familiar themes for this season, whether it's penalties on special teams, the inability to run the ball consistently or turn to it consistently, obviously the turnovers offensively, the inability to protect quarterbacks at times. I mean, a lot of these things keep coming back. And today, even when you're able to get, I thought, better pressure on a quarterback than they've had in a while, I thought that defense, the defensive front, looked more like what we're used to seeing. But there's just too many things you're trying to overcome. And that's been the theme all season, especially with young quarterbacks. You just can't get into a situation where you're beating yourself and expecting you're going to come back from it. I mean, I think Greg Olsen made the comment on the broadcast today that the 16-point lead felt like it was a 40-point lead. And some of that is because you don't have an offense that can sustain drives, so you have to help every possible way you can. And if there's not efficiency everywhere else, which is a tough standard to keep, but that's really how it has to go with everything being this unsettled on offense. So I think it's just, when you get shut out here and the reaction to it was what it was from what we saw in the locker room, this is one I think it's one to pay attention to, because it's not common to see a Kevin O'Connell offense this hapless. And I think when things are this off of their foundation, off of the norm of what we expect, that's when people start to get frustrated. That's when changes start to happen. I think there's going to be a lot of soul searching after this season for how this has gone. And this will be the type of loss that I think probably triggers a lot of that, because you don't want to be an offensive coach of the repute that Kevin O'Connell is, last year's NFL Coach of the Year, and have your name on that, what we saw today. So I think this is one that's going to sit pretty hard for people for quite a while.
And with a former NFL Offensive Player of the Year practically sidelined in his production today. To kind of bring it full circle with your point about how these like 10 to 15 point margins feel like double that with this team. Like, I wonder how much that was in the back of KOC's mind on that 4th and 1 play call of, this might be the only shot in the red zone we get today. We have to be aggressive here. And obviously it went the opposite way for them and made things worse. But you wonder how much that's sitting there when he's making that decision.
Well, and the tricky thing too, he did talk a little bit afterwards about maybe we need to simplify some things a little more. And I've wondered about the volume of the plays they put in, if that's something that they'll, pare back a little bit. But the thing you run into is this is a team at its default that wants to push the ball downfield. They want to chase big plays. They want to have chunks of yardage. It's not the very, very traditional, and we've gone through so many iterations of the West Coast offense, I'm not even sure how much this applies anymore, but the traditional West Coast offense is a lot of 5-6 yard crossing routes that keep the ball moving, and there's still certainly some of that here, but the vertical component of this iteration of the West Coast offense, certainly as Kevin O'Connell sees it, is unique to how a lot of people call it. And that's what they want to be doing, and they don't have that right now. There's just no way for them to push the ball downfield, whether protection holding up or quarterbacks making accurate throws, reading things out to a degree that give them those options downfield. Max Brosmer said today there were concepts that could have given them plays downfield. We saw the one go off Jordan Addison's hands and a couple others that he probably missed. But this offense, to function the way they design it to function, needs a vertical component to it, and for so many reasons they do not have that. So that's where those leads do start to feel like they're a lot bigger, because you are trying to sustain drives with players that aren't used to being able to make things go correctly for 9 or 10 plays on a drive. And when you don't have the vertical element of it, it's just hard to do it. So that is, I do think that's right. That point that Greg Olsen made, I think there's some validity to that, just in the sense that it's hard to expect this offense to score quickly, and then it's also hard for this offense to sustain things enough where you're going to get chances to score. So it changes a lot of things about how you call it, how you play, and how Kevin O'Connell approaches it from this point forward in the last 5 games of the year. Certainly going to be interesting to watch.
The Vikings return to US Bank Stadium next week, where they will host the Commanders. We'll find out more about if J.J. McCarthy makes it through concussion protocol as this week goes on, and we will talk about some of the struggles that the Commanders are having that I don't think are too dissimilar from what the Vikings are going through. 2
playoff teams from last year that are not going to be there this year.
Yeah, we'll talk about all of that on Wednesday when we publish the next Access Vikings episode. In the meantime, you can find all of our work on StarTribune.com, and we will talk to you again soon.